Okay. Um, I think my answer is going to be different than some other people's answers. This is the seventh time I did this. Um, Another faculty member and I did it in 2005. At that time, it was just the second time there'd been a London program for who knows how many years. And we actually employed somebody in London to like book all of our activities, all of our theater programs and things like that for us. And so the first time I went, I really was a pretty much a spectator, and I got to go out and enjoy London for myself uh, without a tremendous amount of responsibility. Second time I went, there was also a second faculty member, but because the way things worked out, she came late, so there was about a month where I was on my own, and there'd been a whole switch. Now we were responsible for our own lodging, we were responsible for our own booking, and we were responsible for making decisions that we never made before. Well, okay, I've done this every odd numbered year in the fall now since 2009. And so by the time the third cycle comes around, I have a lot of responsibilities for this thing. And, um, um, and now to go and be a part of this, really, I think I feel a lot of those responsibilities. I feel that there's certain ways where I have to be very protective of my students in London, at the same time giving them complete freedom. I am very much of the school that that they're at least 19. Everybody was 20 or 21 years old, but they're over 18 years old, and they're expected to know how to behave. And they
So
do.
you're going to
And they
let
do.
them,
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
and you don't have many problems.
Very few problems.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what's it like teaching there? I mean, because you still have to teach. You still
Oh yeah,
teach what?
sure. I
Three
teach
classes?
3 classes. Yeah. Well, for one thing, probably that students are recruited into the program. Almost all of them are theater majors, and they think they're going to London to study at the world famous Globe Theater, Shakespeare's Globe, on the banks of the Thames. And so the Globe program is the sort of the big dog, and we're the tail end. So that program lasts about 2 months. It kicks off near the beginning of our semester, and we schedule everything around it. So I do one class that's basically done in the first 10 days of the semester. I do another class that runs from beginning to end, about 3 days a week, and then I do a class in the last 6, 7 weeks, 8 weeks after the Globe program is completed. So it's a hodgepodge of teaching during our regular 15-week semester. And nothing is, except for I guess one class would be pretty much like the way we do it here, meeting repeatedly with same people, same
Right.
time of day, kind of thing. But the rest of it isn't.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have? Do you get a chance to do much now? As you know, you said the first year you were basically on your own. You got to go and see London, do a lot of things. Do you still get to go do and see?
Oh, I do, and more and more. One of the things that some people on campus know about me, and some people in the Decatur community would know about me, is that my son is like the singer in this kind of major national, international touring blues band. And so in 2009, the second time I was in London, I hit the bricks running and was in, anybody who'd scheduled any blues whatsoever for the previous 6 months in London, I met them and introduced myself. And so I had a 14-show tour set up for the band. What that means is that I now have friends in London, lots and lots of friends. I've had, I'm guessing I may be the only Millikan faculty member who has had a London cabbie in his home in Champaign, and who has had a London school teacher telling stories in his backyard in Champaign, and has a London, and on
Right.
it goes, it's really interesting. I have found that my experience in London gets richer and richer and richer every time because I meet more people, make more friends. I have, and because I've got to go more than once or even more than twice or 3 times, I've built up a network of professional colleagues in London, and so I have giving papers there and being part of presentations there and being part of organizations there has become a part of my professional identity.
So you enjoy it,
I love it.
and you're not going to be doing it anymore.
I'm not going to do it anymore because I will turn 66 next week, and it's time for me to say farewell to full-time teaching at Miller.
66.
Yeah, 66. That's 2/3 of the mark of the devil.
It is. I understand.
Mm.
My Social Security has 3 of them in a row.
3 of them in a row.
Yeah. Yeah, I am the devil.
That explains the horns.
I worried for years, seriously, I worried for years that was going to mean that I was somehow designed to be like Damien from The Omen. And my parents kind of wondered about that too, so.
I don't think that's
But,
proved out to be the case.
Yeah, but I was touch and go there for a while. So,
Yeah.
what are you going to miss most about London?
Well, London is, you're a media theorist. You've read your McLuhan. London is incredibly rich on the sensorium. London will take all 5 of your senses and fill them up constantly. Things are in motion and things are happening and things are changing, and there's a new opportunity to see something that you've never seen before, do something you've never done before, every day, every hour of every day. It's just a level of stimulation that if you go for that kind of thing, it can take you right to the point of being overwhelming.
Really?
Yes, it is.
How is it different from New York?
And even as a old guy, I still love that.
Okay.
Yeah.
How is it different from New York?
Well, I don't know New York very well, but here's my amateurish sense of the comparison, is that London back in first of all, I mean, I think that people in the United States tend to think of the United States as a kind of a crime-ridden, derelict place, and everywhere else seems orderly and crime-free in comparison. But I wouldn't give you a nickel for the difference between the U.S. and the U.K. The people are the same people, and we have the very same tendencies towards violence and so forth. But here's the thing: in about the 90s, the people in London realized they did have problems with visitors. They wanted more visitors. That clearly they prospered on visitors, and it was important for them to really do something about it. And the answer was, the closed circuit camera. And so in London, practically the whole time you're there in any kind of public setting, there's a camera on you. And what that has meant is that London has become a remarkably safe place to be. And so therefore, I think your sense of being able to move about the city day and night is probably, greater there than in New York, but than in practically everywhere, not just in the United States. I mean, I think you feel more secure in London than you do in Paris or Barcelona or Tokyo or practically
anywhere. Do you feel
anywhere.
like you're having any of your freedoms taken away by being on camera?
By
all
being
the time?
on camera? Well, listen, I don't dwell on that, but if you put me in that space and made me dwell on it, it certainly raises a lot of questions.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. We have Law and Order, a famous television program in the U.S. There's also Law and Order UK. I don't know if you've ever seen any of those. They're probably somewhere here in our cable television world. And, practically every episode of Law and Order UK hinges on some CCTV footage at some point, because they've got it. They've got glimpses of people. Once in 2009, we had 2 of our Millikan students who were assaulted on a bus. There was a racist element in the assault, and the 2 young men who did it were identified from CCTV footage, and our U.S. students were invited to come back for the trial at all expenses paid. That's the power of that information.
Yeah. There was a fascinating TV show on a couple of years ago here called Person of Interest, which was all about how cameras and surveillance can help and hurt
Right.
a person in today's world.
Clearly.
So, yeah, that's one of my areas of interest. And it's got to be of yours at some point because it has a lot to do with ethics, the whole idea of
It does.
privacy, security, freedom.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But it's easy. It's easy to not think about that. It's easy to not think about the stuff that we do with our phones. It's easy to think about how much freedom we give up every day.
See, I have thought I don't have a phone. I'm the last middle class American who does not have
A phone?
mobile phone.
Okay.
Yeah, I did not want that intrusion.
All right. They can't find you when you want to go
they,
away.
Well, they may or may not be able to find me. But they're not going to. But people in general can't find me. My thing is here's my thing. I probably shouldn't say this on the air, but in higher education, we're not really paid very well, and yet on the other hand, we're expected to be full professional, really among the highest of the professions. So on one hand, we're sort of recognized for our professional independence, the independence of our thought, the independence of our teaching, and so forth. And on the other hand, the remuneration really doesn't follow that. But so here's what I kind of think. I think one of the last remaining privileges of a professor is to be able to vanish into the University of Illinois library for 6 hours and not have to answer the phone, right? And so I've maintained that the length of my career, and I suppose in retirement I'm going to try to stay with it. And I'm not
Really?
sure I'll succeed, but I'm going to try to stay with it. And it's not so much that I'm worried that somebody from school style. I'm not too worried about a student texting or the department chair calling or those kinds of things. I know perfectly well that if I carried one of these things, it would be my 2 daughters who would be
Always bothering you.
bugging me
Yes.
endlessly. So they just don't do it. It just is something that's much better controlled.
Yeah,
without that.
My wife used to have the cell phone ringtone that was mom, 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 mom. Because
Yeah.
and I always felt that whenever she would get that call, I understood that feeling for her.
Yeah.
So okay,
Mhm.
you said earlier that in England they're the same as we are. The people are the same as we
Yes.
are, and it appears like they've done just about as stupid when they're going politically as we are.
Yeah, they're very confused.
The Brexit thing has just blown my mind because they can't figure that out. They're 3 years into it, and
Right.
they're doing it, but they're not doing it, and
Right.
I don't know if it'll ever happen, even though it's happening.
Yeah, I think at this point they're at a place of no return, and they'll be formally out at the end of this month, and they've given themselves till next December to actually have an agreement in place or not. If they negotiate a whole agreement, then perhaps it won't be quite as horrible as we might fear. If they just crash out next December, then then there are millions
I
of
know.
people who live in the UK whose status there will be challenged, and vice versa. People from the UK who live on the continent, who's why are you entitled to work here? Why are you entitled to go to school here? Why are you entitled to live with your spouse here?
Yeah.
All those things are going to go into play.
Yeah.
There are going to be industries that are ruined by them doing this. So it's very foolish. It's
So
very backwards.
Do they
It's
sit
very
back
backwards.
and say UK instead of USA, or?
Yeah, there's a little bit of that. When I say there, and this offends some of my English friends, this business about being England and Scotland and Wales, and then of course they tag on Northern Ireland, that's really real there. And the problem is the English, the biggest part of the population, the biggest part of the country, have put this together mentally in a different way than have the Scots and the Welsh. And the city people have put it together in a different way than the country people, and so their nation is pretty badly divided in a couple of different ways, and they're just really having a hard time thinking this through. It's an act of self-destruction.
Yeah, it is. But we see it here too. Is Scotland going to Brexit their own, or will Scotland leave the UK?
Uh, well, the new Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, says he's not going to permit them to have a referendum.
Okay.
Yeah, so, okay, so the question becomes, what do they do next to force him to permit them to have a referendum?
Yeah.
So, but yes, I think they would like to have a referendum, and current polls say it would win.
Right. And it was
So-
real close the last time.
They would become an independent nation, and they would immediately rejoin the European Economic Community and the European Union.
Yeah. Yeah. I find this it's fascinating because I can't imagine how the students, the people that are Jason's age or Athena's age, how they're dealing with this, because this is really going to affect their lives going over to Europe.
They're just maddened by it. They just can't imagine how their grandparents could have done this to them.
But why didn't I don't get why they voted how they did. But it sounds to me, when we were talking with Athena last week, she said that basically their other choice wasn't much better.
Their other choice wasn't much better. What's the matter with remaining in the European Union?
No, for Prime Minister.
Oh, for Prime Minister. Oh,
Yeah.
see, I think the other choice was wonderful, but that he was just savaged by the press from
Okay.
the time that he became the head of the Labour Party. He was given a tremendous deficit. You're not near as old as I am, but you have any recollection of McGovern?
Yeah.
This was that.
Okay.
He was George McGovern, sort of, and he was made that everything he said would appear foolish,
Okay.
even when he was right.
Jamie's going to have a question for you. It's going to have to do with the Royals.
Okay.
I do. I don't know. I actually wanted to know if you saw the people glued to the wall at the bridge. Apparently, there were protesters.
I saw the Extinction Rebellion protests several times, but I didn't see anybody glued to the wall.
Okay, well, that's so
Mhm.
disappointing.
Yeah,
It had to be quite a spectacle.
it had to be. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I hear they had to stop that group.
Well, I think that group made an unwise choice and stopped themselves. They one morning, after a series of very successful demonstrations, imaginative, thought-provoking demonstrations that got a lot of favorable public attention, some impatient young men chose to jump on morning train cars, and the outcome was that people around the country just reacted. Well, first of all, you're ruining people's commutes, which are already about as difficult as anybody would want, but it's dangerous. And so, even though sort of self-harm that was likely to be caused and not the public's harm, people did not approve of this whatsoever. I found it interesting. I was with a group of 22 Millikan students, and most of them are probably pretty liberal and sympathetic to what the Extinction Rebellion's views are, but they were appalled. In fact, I had to kind of talk a class down, try to kind of talk them out of this a little bit. That they just lost sympathy overnight for one act.
Yeah. I understand. I understand. I have to ask you another question about another young person, Greta Thunberg. Our president keeps calling her names.
Yeah.
How do you react to that? Because did you get to see her when you were over at the conference this year?
I was at the COP in Madrid, and I was there during the same day she was, but I did not see her.
Okay.
I was in actual meetings at the conference, and she was in city central of Madrid leading a rally of 250,000. I think I chose badly. I should have gone to see her that evening when she spoke.
It is amazing that a 16-year-old girl has got has made such an impact on world politics.
Yes.
Americans just look at what's happening here, but this is a worldwide thing. And that's another thing that I kind of wanted to talk with you about. We talked last year. My wife, as I was walking in, because I've got kind of a cold, and I'm kind of, miserable. My wife was like, you got to be happy for the next 2 hours. And, I was like, But I'm going to be talking to Tom,
we
and
ordered you
Tom
to
is
be
going to be
happy.
talking about global warming, so he's going to make me sad anyway.
That's right. I'm the bearer of bad news.
You are.
I am.
But I think that it is so important
Mhm.
to have someone like you, especially someone like you here at Milliken, because
You know what though? SpaceX is going to save us. We're moving to Mars,
Okay.
so we can trash that planet too.
Right. Oh yes.
Oh dear.
Mhm. Wonder how much energy it's going to take to get us all there.
Oh, too much.
Yeah. You know, a year ago I was talking to you about this, and I remember we were talking about America and how the United States was dealing with stuff, you know, internationally. And even though the rhetoric coming out of here said one thing, what was happening over there said something completely different.
Yes.
But it appears, and I'm not sure, but it appears like some of our actions over there are now starting to match our rhetoric over here.
Yeah. I think that's true. I mean,
And that's got to be, you know, it's got to be frightening across the world to see us turn our back on this issue.
I think that, you know, 3 years ago, when Trump said that he would take the United States out of the Paris Agreement, people in Europe particularly said, too bad, we're going to go ahead and do this anyway because this is right. And not just morally right, but it's scientifically right, and this will make a difference whether you are part of this or not. And I think they, in the back of their mind, they thought, well, and you'll come back around too. Well, now we are at the very cusp. I've been to 4 of these climate change meetings now. 2 of these kind of global attention gathering ones in the autumn, but also 2 of the meetings in the spring where I actually get to be in the room with the diplomats and actually watch the agreements being, hammered out phrase by phrase. And the U.S. has always been at those. In fact, I witnessed U.S. delegates chatting with some young people. I don't know whether from what the conversation was about in a session in Madrid. So far, the United States has been there, but this is the end now. The United States will, I assume, not be there in 2020.
Now,
And then Trump will lose, and the United States will be back again.
if he
We will.
loses,
2021.
we'll get back in a hurry. I would
Day
assume.
one. Day one. It's the most important thing in the world,
And the world would welcome us back
The world
because
would.
it's so important.
clearly.
How do you respond? Because this has got to drive you up a wall. My wife, this is like my wife has to deal with people being anti-vax all the time,
Yeah.
right? And she deals with someone online. There was someone online today who was making extremely absurd anti-vax statements. As a person who is as well versed on climate change as you are, how do you deal with the United States citizen who looks you right in the eye and says it doesn't exist, it's all a fraud?
Well, I mean, I think that I'm writing a book right now on this, and I lay out in the beginning, the basic texts, and anybody's welcome to go to them. Now, I think that and the data is horrifying. We just got the 2019 data. It is the second warmest year in since records have been kept. It is the warmest year if you discount the one high carbon plus El Nino year of 2014. So basically, every year is warmer, and you can just watch the chart climb. We know the oceans are warmer than they've ever been. It's irrefutable. We know that 43 years in a row, you've studied social science. For 43 consecutive years, temperatures globally have been above average. Now, what in the world would you say if you found that in any study of anything? It's just the kind of thing that it requires our attentiveness. But okay, I could say all these things, and there are still people who wouldn't agree. But here's what I would tell that person. This is what I really think. Fortunately, we live in a democracy, and the real democracy is 50% plus one, and we have way more than 50% plus one on our side. So it really doesn't matter anymore what your foolish views are, because we are going to fix and change this. And if we don't fix and change this, it's their fault and our fault for failing to do so. But I mean, really, I don't feel any obligation to convince people who refuse to engage the question at the level of factuality.
But the problem is, and I agree, to an extent, the
But
thing
it's a
with the
different
vaccines,
problem
it's a
than
different thing.
Yes, it's
But-
very different because you want that family to get their vaccines.
Yeah, because they can infect other people and people that aren't, that are immune compromised. But the problem with a 50+1 thing is in our democracy,
Mm-hmm.
somebody with 3 million more votes can lose an election.
Right.
And so here we are with, the great orange leader who is like, this doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And that's where this gets really frustrating.
Well,
I think.
but it's,
I
it's
think
not
this week
just,
he
it's
did
not
admit
just,
it exists.
It's not just Trump, though. There is
Well-
an entire political party that says it does not exist.
Well, or they'll what
Not the whole party.
what is frustrating too is when folks will say, okay, they'll even admit, yes, the world is warmer, but we haven't caused it. It's some sort of part
Well,
of
that's-
natural.
That's very 1995. Now it's 2020, and we really have to engage this in a different way. We just and one of the my training is in rhetorical studies, and one of the things that we learn about art, one of the first things we learn about argument, really, is that argument is reversible, and argument is really unending. There is no termination point
No.
in an argument. But it's just because that's true in the world of our words, that does not make it true in the world of material reality. There's a brilliant environmental thinker by the name of Timothy Morton, and he says, I love this illustration. He says that on one hand you've got who's the famous Oxford atheist? Richard Dawkins. You've got
Mhm.
Richard Dawkins on one hand, and you've got Pat Robertson on the other. And he says both of them better wear sunscreen if they're going out in the summertime. The world really doesn't care about your fundamentalist Christianity. The world really doesn't care about your obdurate atheism. They're not very interesting when it comes to the rays that are affecting your melanin. It's just not your words just don't matter at a certain point. And so 1995 was a very interesting moment for them to question about the methodology of some of these things and raise some other considerations, but frankly their considerations they're just backward, and they could get us all killed, and I'm not interested in spending my time trying to convince them.
But the thing that scares me is that basically they've already killed us, or
Well,
my
there's that.
kids, or
There's
my
that.
grandkids.
There's that.
And this is the newest argument I've been hearing.
Yeah.
Well, since we've already passed that point, why should we stop and why should we do anything to change?
Yeah, well, the U.S. Department of Transportation released a study in 2018 that essentially said this. We're looking at 6 degrees warming by 2100, and we might as well stay with our gas guzzlers.
Yeah. That's
Oh
horrible.
my gosh.
Yeah, well, and I don't know, I could be right, but it goes against every single thing I believe about our responsibilities towards one another.
Okay, now I've got to come up with this. Can trees and seaweed and hemp save us?
It can help, right? Yeah, and this is why, a minute ago I said, well, the president did essentially acknowledge that it's a very grave problem this
With
week
the trees.
when he proposed, by the way, this is not his new proposal, my gosh. People have been saying this for a long time and been acting on it aggressively, but 1 trillion trees. Well, why would he propose 1 trillion trees in one minute part of his speech? Another part of his speech says that this is not even a problem. I mean, that's just a blatant contradiction. So as far as I'm concerned, even Trump is on board now. It's just a question of what we're actually going to do. One of the things we should do, by the way, is plant a trillion trees.
A trillion trees.
Yeah.
What about the hemp thing and the seaweed? You
That's
see,
all
these are
good.
things I've heard. I just, I read this, and some of the stuff I read, I'm just like, wow.
Food is going to be replaced by
Yeah.
essentially fermenting.
Because we have to kill all the cows.
Well, yeah, we don't have to kill them all, but yeah, we've got to get off of these living creatures walking around making
Farting.
methane, and yeah, we have to do that. Sure.
I'm having a
They
hard
take
time
too
getting
much
on
water.
board with that.
Yeah, I have a hard time with that too. Like, let's come up with electric cars first. Like, that to me just makes a lot more sense than kill all the cows.
We don't want to kill all the cows, but we can gradually eat them, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So as long as I get
We're
the
just
last
going to
hamburger.
sterilize all of them so that just no
Yeah.
more will be made.
At our house, our 2020 resolution is the Meatless Monday, and a really strict definition of Meatless Monday. No traditional meats, no fish, no butter, no cheese, no milk, no
Is this
No
vegan
eggs.
or just no? Like, are you going like vegan extreme, or
Well,
you?
yeah, I think of vegan as a whole other life commitment. That's something about our
Right.
relationship to animals, and I don't necessarily share that view. But I would consider 1 day a week of a strict vegetarianism: no eggs, no cheese, no butter, no meat of any kind, no fish.
That's interesting.
1 day a week. If everybody did that, that would be an enormous reduction in the water waste and the calorie waste and the shipping cost and the methane that's going into all this animal production. And presumably those agricultural industries would still have a healthy market, right? And we could get to a day and a half if we could get some new vegetarian habits where it becomes a 3 or 4 dinners a week thing, then I think our quality of life is still quite high, and we've made a tremendous difference.
And if you do vegetarian right, you don't miss the meat. That's the thing. If you eat the high quality foods and it's cooked well and seasoned well, you don't really miss it.
I haven't.
But, yeah. I'm not vegetarian, but there's many days where I will go and not have any meat. And if I've not eaten well, I miss it. But on the days
Sure.
that I have eaten well, I could do that forever.
But see, here's what I want to affirm in what you said, Jamie. You said electric cars before this changing our diet. I think where I agree is, an electric car is not a question of individual consumer choice. I don't think. It is right now. It's a question of individual consumer choice. Are you going to buy a Tesla or not? But
Well, can you afford it? Or
well,
not, too?
can you afford it or not? Are you willing to put that to get credit and to afford it? These kind of difficult choices, but that's a policy choice, and that's where I think the truth in what you're saying is. We've got to get the policies lined up so people give up that third car in the family and then the second car in the family, and then get the hybrid car and get the electric car, and just gradually get ourselves off this. Get the public transportation built into our lives.
And I think we need more
Yes.
options as consumers. Like the car makers aren't. There's not that. There are options out there, but there's not that many options. And the ones that are out there, if you get larger than, a Prius, are really pricey.
Yeah.
Really pricey. Because I tried to buy one to haul dogs around to dog shows. Well, you need a fairly sizable vehicle, and man,
Sure.
you're talking big bucks.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, do we want to sell the house and buy this vehicle? Or seriously,
Yeah, it is. Those are,
So not to make excuses, but
right.
but there needs to be better options, and I think our industry needs to make a commitment that they say they are making, but they're not.
Right.
The last time America made this commitment was with a person that for years I have considered to be our worst American president in years, and I've started to rethink a lot of the things he did. I've come to the conclusion that he was way ahead of his time, even though he was specifically a failure as a president.
Mhm.
That's Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
He tried to put America on metric system. He tried to
Me too.
Which would have made my
rework
life
energy.
easier.
He had houses. He had houses that were built. You know,
Right.
you see these houses built in the 70s. They've all got the overhangs and everything, so that you protect and you save energy. He really pushed all of this stuff, and for a couple of
Right.
years, people got into it.
Yes.
And then they were like, well, you know what? He's not a very good president, and this is hard, so let's go with Ronnie. And
Yeah.
things changed. But, you know,
Yes.
it's
I mean-
really hard for me to reevaluate what I think of him, because that was always just a huge part of my life. He was a bad
He was
president.
a bad president.
He may not have been.
Yeah, those were difficult years,
Yeah.
and a lot of things that that we thought we could take for granted got reversed either during those years or right after. It was a tough time.
We also had a crisis of confidence coming off of Vietnam, and
Yes.
you know, I mean, we felt beat up.
I think it's interesting that that when President Trump really wants to demagogue certain issues, he seems to want to run against Jimmy Carter. He wants to run against the '70s. So just last week he's complaining about dishwashers and light bulbs and
Yeah, I
these
saw
things.
that.
Yeah.
Well, it's the newfangled light bulbs, you know, those
Right.
LED lights. I mean, my goodness.
Yeah, which my experience with them is that they're a little dim when you turn them on, but they brighten. They look nice. That they're a good variety, and my gosh, I don't ever seem to have to change them.
I understand.
What a terrible thing to have
I
happen.
understand.
But anyway, it's there's resentments that go back to the '70s that it's easy to stir up in American
Yeah.
public life.
Yeah, especially with old white people.
Well, you said it.
I did. I'm not. I am not afraid of saying it. Have you looked at our presidential candidates?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm waiting to see how people respond to that.
Yeah,
I'm interested in seeing what they've got to say.
sure.
So,
Yeah.
it's your last year, though. You don't have to worry about it.
Oh, you mean on campus? I don't.
On
have to worry about
campus.
it. No, I don't.
How are you going to deal with that?
What? Not teaching full
Yeah.
time? I'm gonna be very busy. I mean, I'm hoping to start a international not-for-profit and have some other teaching occasionally. And
Where will you teach?
I don't know. Somebody's got to offer me a job.
Okay.
Right?
You see, that's the thing. I get to Christmas and I'm like, oh, thank God I'm away from them. But by New Year's, I'm ready to see them again.
Oh,
and then I
yeah.
get to the summer break, and you know, I'm happy, and then I'm unhappy, and then it's like, you know, I have to have a student fix, because
Right.
the energy that college students bring to every single day is amazing.
Yes.
So I don't know how I would want to leave that.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to leave them.
It's all the other stuff.
Yeah, it's all the other stuff. Sure.
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice if you didn't have to deal with all the other stuff?
Always. That's what everybody says in
And
all
they
their
paid
jobs.
you what
Yeah.
they paid
You know-
you what you were worth.
You know, people of a certain age, I mean, I think we're just across the board. We're not having the careers we thought we were going to have. The meaning of being a physician, the meaning of being an attorney, the meaning of being a minister in a church. All of these things are, you enjoy less independence, you're more beholden to complexities of organizations that you, it just doesn't, and some of these fields are having difficulty attracting people, especially the people they want in them.
Yeah.
Because young people look at these, they do not look at them the way perhaps we did, that these were magnificent opportunities to achieve things and have success and get recognition, and it's just not that clear and clean anymore.
No. I thought you were going to say something.
Well, I was just sitting here thinking, was it ever though? I think, when
Well,
we
it's
go
not.
into a profession, we have this thought in our mind, I'm gonna make things better in this area,
Yes.
and this was our passion, and we get there, and some of that holds true. Hopefully, enough of it holds true that you can keep doing what you were trained to do.
Right.
You know, but so much of the other stuff, like the bane of the medical world's existence, is the electronic medical record, which
Sure.
is so important. But
Right.
yet we're like seeing patients and we're clicking, staring at computers instead of like spending time with our patients, which is
Right.
madness.
Yes.
You know, and one of the you know answers to that is the medical scribe now. So we're going to have this person come with us everywhere we go that's going to document, which would solve problems. But I'm like, man, I can't afford that. I don't know how everybody's making all this money. But I'm
Right.
just sitting here thinking,
I was in
think
one
so-
session where there's a medical scribe. I thought it was
Oh,
pretty fascinating.
It would be awesome if I could afford to pay somebody, you know, $25,000 a year to do that. I can't, so it's not an option.
Right.
But just saying, I think when we go into a profession, we all have some passion that drove us there.
Yeah.
You know, and then we get there and it's not totally what we thought. And I don't know that
Yeah.
that's new.
Well, yeah, probably
You know.
not. But I don't know. I think that things are that over just a discrete 40, 50 year period, there a lot of these professions really have lost their attractiveness.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And
You know-
ours in higher education is certainly diminished.
Well, I will tell you this, and you know, I was thinking about this as you were talking. I wasn't listening well enough, as I tell my students, but years ago, when I was a sports writer, I was starting to burn out. I can remember being burned out. I can remember, you know, sitting back and sitting in a high school gym, covering a basketball game, wondering what the hell I was doing here.
Right.
And I can remember my first year teaching at Oklahoma State. And I had this class of young journalists who were so excited. And I sat back and said, all right, now here's what it really is. And I spent like 15 minutes telling them all of the realities that you face on a daily basis.
Right.
The fact that the job that you had and that you covered, now you have to cover 10 times that for the same pay and work maybe twice the amount of hours. The job that you are going to be working on this story, and it's a great story, and your publisher comes and says he doesn't want to say that or write this story because this place advertises with us. And I went through this whole list of stories
Yes.
and things that I had seen happen.
Right.
And that was a cynicism in me. And I remember just spewing all this out on this class of students who were so idealistic. And before I was done, they were like, why do we want to do this? And as I've gotten into this, and I've done this more and more and more, the longer, I know this sounds bad, but the longer that I've been away from the newsroom
Uh-huh.
and the toxicity that you can have in a newsroom,
Right.
the more I get back to what I loved about journalism and talk to students about what was wonderful about it. And I spend a lot less time talking about the soul suckingness of any job, right?
Right.
There
And
comes
that's
a
the
point
thing.
when we're just done, and you were done.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Right.
And that's the thing. It's any job. It's,
Yeah.
you know, any job that you have. The job as a professor has a soul-sucking atmosphere to it. Every job you have
Yeah.
has one. I don't think there's a single job in the world that does not have any soul-sucking in it.
Not anymore.
No. I don't know if there ever was.
I don't know.
Maybe a pirate.
A pirate. Now that's soul sucking.
Yeah, I understand.
That's boredom personified.
Until you found something. You know.
I am still trying out, though, for the role of Duchess of Sussex, since that is going to be vacant. You know, I'm just saying I could totally do that. It
Could
would
you do
not
that?
be a hardship.
Jamie
Okay.
wants to be a princess.
I do.
Okay. Well, I'm sure somewhere out there is an opportunity.
It just goes to show, like, no matter where you're at, there are downsides, and everybody else can think, well, they have it so great,
Yes.
or they do, you know. But when you're in a situation and you have to deal with the realities and the BS that goes on with it, it's not fun all the time. You know,
I don't think being a royal is ever fun.
Oh, I think it's honestly. I think living in that fishbowl will be like. I laugh about it, but the reality is no way.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
mean,
no way.
they might have a couple enviable vacations a year. That's
Yeah,
about it.
but even then, they've got people chasing them down with long range lenses. You know, Catherine
Right.
was photographed topless, like from somebody that was 3 miles away, and it's like, you know what?
3 miles away.
I mean, really, why is this a scandal? She's with her husband. They were alone. You were 3 miles away. You know, it's not a scandal.
That's no scandal.
It's no scandal. You know, so.
Mhm.
And that's true. I mean, you know, I wouldn't want to have to do that. But like I said, I don't think there's any job that doesn't have a bad part to it. So, well, you're going to find that out.
I guess so.
Because you don't have any plan on retiring and just kicking your heels up and saying, okay, global warming or climate change, come and get me.
No, absolutely not.
You still optimistic?
I seem to be genetically optimistic.
How can we save ourselves?
You know, Scott, I go back and forth about this. I think that historically, when people have done the very hardest things that required the most sacrifice, it's always been wartime. And, you know, well over 100 years ago, William James wrote about the moral equivalent of war. How can we have all of the passion, all of the concentration of energy, all the self-discipline of war without the violence of war, right? How do we achieve that kind of thing? And I think that the sad fact is that I'm not sure we're in like the war on climate change, and I'm not sure that the only model that we've ever had to get, you know, whole societies of people to concentrate their energy, I'm not sure it will work now. I mean, even if you could sort of formulate it that way, I'm not sure people can be, you know, we know people can be gung-ho for 5 years, but can we get people to be gung-ho for 55 years and accept all those sacrifices that this is going to require? I don't know. I don't have an answer.
Isn't the time going to come when they don't have a choice?
Well, I mean, I think that we're already at that place. But see, my fear is that, like, people here in the United States will be partly protected from the worst effects of this. We will have the horrendous weather. We will have the fires. We will have to move, you know, trillions of dollars of property away from shorelines, but we probably won't have, you know, 80 million refugees as in Bangladesh. We won't have heat death on the Arabian Peninsula. We won't have, you know, 100 million refugees in Central Africa, because those are really, they're going to be, these are the people who are going to be hammered by climate change in a way that's just apocalyptic. And so I'm afraid that people here will sit back and say, well, what we need is a little more air conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That's exactly what's going to happen.
and you know, what's really important is not only will we not be the people who have the refugees in the tens and maybe even hundreds of millions level, and the absolute loss of our habitats along shorelines and so forth, and what the horrible paradox is that a few years ago, you know, the slogans are always changing around, so we try to motivate people. And so, you know, 3 years ago, the slogan was, we all did this. Well, the fact is, these people aren't even the ones who did it. They didn't do this. We are the ones who did it, and we're the ones who are least likely to pay the terrible effects from it. So, under that scenario, will we be able to reach down and pull up the self-sacrifice required in order
Oh,
to.
I'm sorry. The cynic in me is already looking at this.
The cynic.
I've already
Well,
got
yeah.
a slogan, a white privilege slogan for the North America about this.
Yeah, well, and arguably the whole Syrian crisis of the last 5 years has been a climate change crisis.
Yeah.
Syria has suffered historic drought.
Yeah.
So on and on it goes. What do we call that? We want to call that jihadis, and we want to call that ISIS and ISIL and all these different names for this thing. None of which is probably accurate for what has really taken place there. What's happened is a brutal regime repressing a large population because they no longer can feed them and care for them. And that's a direct result of climate change. So we're just going to, as long as we can lie and say, the problems in the world are the Muslims and so forth, you can be, you can't be pessimistic enough. If that is if that's going to be the analytical frame that we're going to take to try to understand what's going on in the next 30 years, we are truly in a hopeless plight. So I just have to be optimistic that we can get out of that frame.
Well, I'm telling you, it's going to be seaweed and hemp.
Seaweed and hemp. Well,
I'm telling you, I don't know. I've read these stories about how these seaweed farms and hemp farms, because they collect so much sunlight, that
That's
they're
good.
going to change it and they're going to save the world.
that'd be great.
So there you go.
Mm-hmm.
Invest in seaweed and hemp.
I don't know how you grow hemp in Alaska, though.
No.
July.
I mean, that's it. July and July only. I don't know how fast it can grow. They'll have to have hybrids hemp.
Mm-hmm.
Are people still afraid of the current that runs,
Which current?
the Atlantic one that runs up, keeps the Bermuda,
Oh, yeah.
and with the ice melting in that, it could change that current, which could truly affect America's climate.
Yeah. Oh, yes. There are terrible paradoxes. Al Gore was really clear in Inconvenient Truth documentary that the last time there was a major melt in Greenland, so much cold water poured out of the upper Atlantic, the very northern Atlantic, that Europe went into an ice age.
Yeah.
So people who think, oh, I need to see hot tomorrow in order to understand this, really are being quite simpletons. We can get all kinds of effects. We can completely throw off the Atlantic currents. We presume, it seems as if we may have already thrown off the jet stream.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these things are uncertain. I'm sorry if anybody out there is a skeptic and wants to point to any hesitancy in the things I say, but there are elements of uncertainty in these things. But all the scenarios are terrible, and no one should be flippant about
I don't know.
just
I think
letting
that
these
wouldn't
things
be
happen.
a bad idea to buy property like 15 miles off of the Miami coast.
Well, isn't that interesting? Mm-hmm. But here's what's really real. DeSoto County, Florida, has already decided that they're not going to service 600 miles of county road.
I know. I was reading that a couple of weeks ago.
The water's rising in the Everglades,
Yeah.
and 600 miles of county road in DeSoto County are no longer going to be serviced. When they go under, they will be gone.
And the people are upset about
The
it.
people who
But
live-
they're wealthy, and they're like, well, we'll just figure something out.
The people who live on those roads. Well.
So, yeah, I did. And last semester, I was teaching a features course, and I made my students read a feature on what's going to happen, like, a 50 years down the road scenario. I think it was the New York Times that did it. Great piece, frightening. I made my kids read that, and they were just angry with me. They were like, "Oh my goodness, you can't make us read this." I was sad. I had to go see my psychiatrist for this,
Yeah, well.
It's coming.
It's
And the
good
thing
business
is,
for
I'm going to be
psychiatrists.
dead.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be dead.
Adios.
And my wife, maybe.
I'll be dead.
No.
But my kids and my grandkids, they're getting it.
They are.
I kind of feel bad for them.
Mm-hmm.
Not bad enough to quit eating hamburger, but I do feel bad for them.
Well,
So,
You can have hamburgers. You just have to pay $30 each.
I understand. We're getting to that point anyway.
Yeah.
I'm getting to that point anyway. So, anything else you want to talk about?
Oh, I think we've talked about a lot.
We have.
Mm-hmm.
You have to come back.
All right.
You have to come back at the end of the semester. We're going to do something on World Press Freedom Day.
Oh,
I know that
great.
you did something on that last semester.
Yes.
Athena came back just extremely fired up about it. She's got this whole big book and everything.
Uh-huh. We wrote a book.
Yeah, so we're gonna do something on it this semester.
Okay.
We'll figure out what, and you
Okay.
have to come back and talk about that.
Sure. I should have the
And-
students in the class talk about it
And I would love to do that.
because, they're the ones that did the country by country reports.
Yeah, I would love to do that. And next Tuesday, I hope you're around. And Jeffrey Sterling
Oh, yeah.
is coming to town.
Unfortunately, I teach on Tuesday night. And this was
Bring your class.
Well, yeah, but
I understand. It's
I have a
important.
hard-
I
it's a night class. If I give up a night class, I give up a week.
I know. He will be, and I told some of my students, your class is right next to mine.
Okay.
In my journalism class, he'll be in that journalism class at 1:30 or at 2 that Tuesday. And I told some of my students to come on over. If you want to bring some of yours over to listen to him talk for a while,
Okay.
they're more than welcome to come.
Okay. I would seriously consider doing
All right.
that.
You don't have to. I'm not going
Yeah,
to
I
put you
know.
on the spot or
I know.
anything, but
These are always tough choices.
I know.
But
It's hard
I'm
to
tired of
let
doing
your
it.
kids or you go and lose class time for it. I get it.
Right.
But it's just it's one of those that it's a good opportunity.
Mhm.
Tell them
It
to go
is.
tell them to go listen to him that night too.
It seems like a unique and uniquely powerful presentation.
Yeah, it is. All right. Thank you very much. I
You're
appreciate
very
it.
welcome.
It's always fun to have you on. It depresses me, but it makes me happy too.
All right.
All right.
But we have pills for that.
I know. I know.
All right.
All right. We'll see you later.
Good seeing you.
Good to
Great
see
to see you
you,
again,
yes.
Jamie. And our fine engineer. Very quiet.
You're listening to WJMU 89.5 The Quad. We will be back.
Good stuff.
I don't know.
No, it was interesting.
I think it's probably stuff I said last time.
It
No,
doesn't matter.
It wasn't.
Different.
Okay.
It
It was
wasn't.
different?
Yeah.
Okay.
I really like talking about London. I liked talking
Yeah,
about
that
this.
would be